Ringo here. Peace and love, everybody. Update time.
While most icons of his generation have long since faded from the spotlight, Ringo Starr is still out there in 2026, commanding the stage with energy that defies his years. It begs the question, how did the man once written off as just the drummer end up being the last Beatle still standing tall? But here's what nobody saw coming. This past April, in a stunning interview, Starr finally broke a silence he had kept for over 6 decades. And what he revealed wasn't just about music. It was the hidden key to how the greatest band in history actually survived as long as it did. Let's dig into the story behind that confession, piecing together details that have never been laid out quite like this before. Now in his 9th decade of life, Ringo Starr shows a work ethic that seems to laugh in the face of aging. From 2021 onward, he's kept releasing new material, EPs like Zoom In and Change the World, each one carrying that same unshakable optimism he's known for. Then came 2023, a genuine turning point. Artificial intelligence helped pull John Lennon's vocals out of an old, unfinished recording, breathing new life into the track now and then. Starr stepped in personally to lay down the final drum parts, and the result shot to the top of charts worldwide decades after the band's last release. In later interviews, he described the moment he heard his late friend's voice again, recovered from decades of dust and silence, as something close to a spiritual encounter. It was as though the bond between the four of them had never truly broken, even though only he and Paul McCartney remained to carry the music forward. Then, in January 2025, Starr did something nobody expected. He released an album called Look Up, his first full country record in more than 50 years, since Beaucoup of Blues. The reaction from critics was immediate and overwhelmingly positive. At 84 years old, the album landed straight in the Billboard Top 10, a feat almost unheard of for an artist of his era. Reviewers worldwide praised the way his seasoned drumming paired with a weathered, story-driven vocal style that only comes from a lifetime of living through it. But the real shock came on April 24, 2026, when Starr unveiled his second studio album, made in partnership with acclaimed producer T-Bone Burnett. He called it Long, Long Road, a title that mirrors the journey he's walked to get here. The lead single, It's Been Too Long, landed on major charts in May 2026, its melody wrapped around themes of time slipping away, loss, and the quiet joys that still show up every day. And then on May 8th, something fans had waited decades for finally happened. Starr and McCartney, the two surviving Beatles, released an emotional duet titled Home to Us. It racked up millions of streams within hours of dropping. Here's where the story gets really interesting. In an exclusive sit-down with Tom Power on CBC this past April, Starr said something that reframed everything people thought they knew about his role in the band. He admitted, flat out, that he never set out to be the greatest drummer of all time. And that admission opens a door into what really held the Beatles together during their most chaotic years. According to Starr, his real value wasn't technical skill behind the kit, it was patience. He was, by his own account, the only one capable of tolerating and bridging the band's massive, clashing personalities. His exact words have stuck with fans ever since. He wasn't the best drummer, but he was the one person who could stand being around all of them without losing his mind. He wasn't lucky, he said. He was simply the most patient. That single line confirmed something longtime observers had quietly believed for years. Ringo Starr wasn't just a musician in the group. He was the connective tissue, the steady heartbeat that kept the Fab Four from falling apart before they did. Right now, the All-Star Band's 2026 tour is rolling through major venues across the United States, with plans to push into Europe. At 85, he still brings a stage presence that commands respect from audiences decades younger than him. And when reporters recently pressed him about retirement, his answer left no room for doubt. The drumsticks, he said, would only leave his hands the day his heart finally stops. So much for those retirement rumors. That admission of patience he made decades into his career is really the key that unlocks everything about how this man managed to outlast nearly everyone around him. But to understand where that endurance came from, we have to rewind all the way back, past the fame, past the band, to the very beginning. We're talking 1940s Liverpool, the slums, where a young boy named Richard Starkey was simply trying to survive. There was no glamour here, no early sign of destiny, just hospital wards, hardship, and the faint, unlikely beginnings of a rhythm that would one day shape generations. And here's the part of his story almost nobody talks about. Before he ever touched a drum kit, Ringo Starr nearly died as a child, more than once. Richard Starkey was born on July 7, 1940, in a modest home on Madron Street in the Dingle district of Liverpool, right as World War II was tearing through Europe, casting his earliest years under the shadow of bombing raids. Things at home didn't get easier. In 1943, when Richard was just 3, his father walked out for good, leaving his mother, Elsie, to scrape by on whatever grueling work she could find to raise her son alone. Then, in 1946, disaster struck again. Richard developed acute peritonitis after a dangerously complicated appendectomy. At only 6 years old, he slipped into a coma that lasted days, and doctors weren't optimistic about his chances. He ended up spending a full year as a patient at Myrtle Street Children's Hospital just to recover. That year away from school left him so far behind his classmates that he was practically unable to read by the time he returned. It wasn't until age 8 that he properly resumed his education, struggling badly with basic literacy, and it took the patient help of a neighbor to get him caught up enough to keep going. But the hardship wasn't finished with him yet. In 1953, right as Richard turned 13, a tuberculosis outbreak swept across the UK, and the illness settled into his lungs. He was pulled away from his family and sent into isolation at Heswall Sanatorium, where he would remain for the next 2 years, cut off almost entirely from the outside world. And it was in that isolation, in those quiet, lonely years, that everything changed. To keep patients active and distract them from the monotony, nurses organized a small hospital band. That's where Richard Starkey picked up a pair of drumsticks for the very first time, tapping out rhythms on the wooden cabinet beside his hospital bed. He later said that was the exact moment rhythm got under his skin, the moment music started to feel like something closer to medicine than hobby. Those clumsy, instinctive taps became his lifeline, the one thing that made the pain bearable. By 1955, Richard was finally released and trying to find his footing in the working world. His body still bore the marks of years of illness, but he took a job as an apprentice at Henry Hunt's equipment company, saving up enough to buy his very first proper drum kit. That purchase set everything in motion. He joined a skiffle group called the Eddie Clayton Skiffle Group, his first real foothold on the small stages and grassroots gigs scattered across Liverpool. His steady, dependable sense of timing quickly got him noticed by other local musicians. In 1959, he was asked to join Rory Storm and the Hurricanes, the most respected band on the Merseyside scene at the time. It was during this stretch that the name Ringo Starr was officially born, a nod to his habit of stacking rings on his fingers, with Starr tying into the drum solos the band liked to call Star Time. So long before he became one of the wealthiest drummers on the planet, Ringo spent most of his childhood simply trying not to die in a hospital bed. But it was exactly those isolated, painful years that built something in him that John, Paul, and George would eventually need more than they realized. Then came the part of the story most people get wrong, the idea that joining the Beatles was some triumphant, easy ride. It wasn't. On August 14, 1962, John Lennon made the call that would rewrite music history, inviting Ringo Starr to step into the band and replace drummer Pete Best just as the group was about to break through. But Ringo's first steps with the band were far from smooth. Only 4 days later, on August 18, 1962, he played his debut show with them at the Cavern Club, and the mood in that room was anything but welcoming. Loyal fans of Pete Best booed relentlessly and waved protest signs, furious that this new drummer had taken his place. The shadow of Pete Best never fully lifted, and that lingering resentment from the crowd put enormous psychological weight on the young drummer. The storm wasn't over either. In September 1962, when the band headed into Abbey Road Studios to record, producer George Martin openly doubted Ringo's abilities and brought in session drummer Andy White to take his place behind the kit. On the recorded version of Love Me Do, Ringo was bumped down to playing tambourine. He later admitted that those early days left him feeling completely crushed, like he wasn't wanted. But doubt didn't last long. Ringo soon revealed something none of the other drummers in Liverpool had, a completely original style, born from playing a right-handed kit despite being left-handed. That quirk produced fills and transitions nobody else could replicate, the kind heard in tracks like Come Together or A Day in the Life. Experts would later say it was Ringo's drumming that gave the Beatles' sound its soul. By the mid-60s, as Beatlemania exploded across the globe, it was Ringo who carried the heaviest emotional burden behind the scenes. While the others chased their own creative ambitions, he found himself increasingly isolated, lonely even at the height of the band's success. That tension boiled over in August 1968 during the recording of the White Album. The studio had become almost unbearable, thanks to relentless clashes between Paul McCartney and John Lennon, and Ringo finally hit his breaking point. Feeling shut out and unappreciated, he abruptly quit the band, retreating to a boat off the coast of Sardinia just to escape the chaos. It was during that self-imposed exile, staring out at open water, that he wrote Octopus's Garden, one of the rare original songs he ever penned, and one that still resonates as a quiet declaration of someone craving freedom. His sudden departure rattled the rest of the band hard enough that they were forced to confront just how much they actually needed him. To win him back, they sent telegrams and flowers to wherever he was staying. When he finally walked back into the studio, his entire drum kit was buried under fresh flowers, the band's way of saying sorry. That moment proved something undeniable. Ringo wasn't just a member of the group. He was the glue holding together egos far too large to coexist on their own. Still, the cracks kept spreading. By 1969, during the recording of Let It Be, Ringo had settled into the role of peacekeeper once again, working to diffuse the escalating tension between George Harrison and Paul McCartney long enough to finish the album. He wasn't just keeping the beat for the songs anymore. He was keeping time for an empire that was slowly coming apart at the seams. And when the lights finally went dark on the Beatles in 1970, the man who always seemed to be smiling started sliding into a void that no amount of drumming could fill. What came next is a part of his story that rarely gets told. After the Beatles officially split, Ringo, surprisingly, found more commercial success than anyone expected. In 1973, he released the album Ringo, a genuinely historic project that managed to bring all four former bandmates together in some capacity for the first time since the breakup. It shot to #1 in multiple countries, driven by hits like Photograph and You're 16. That success quieted, at least temporarily, the lingering doubts about whether he could thrive on his own. But underneath the solo triumph, the weight of expectation was starting to wear him down. He turned to film as an outlet, and on the set of Caveman in early 1980, he met actress Barbara Bach. Their relationship moved fast, leading to marriage in 1981, but any happiness was quickly overshadowed by tragedy. On December 8, 1980, John Lennon was murdered in New York, and the news hit Ringo like a physical blow. He flew to the Dakota almost immediately to stand by Yoko Ono and shield her from the chaos of the press. But that loss sent him spiraling, and from 1980 through 1988, his life descended into addiction and self-destruction. He later confessed to drinking as much as 16 bottles of wine in a single day just to numb the pain. That destructive spiral didn't just hurt him, it tore at his family too, something he said he carries deep regret over to this day. During one particularly out-of-control episode, he turned violent toward his own wife, a chapter he kept hidden for years before eventually speaking about it publicly, hoping it might warn others about what addiction can do. By the late 80s, his health and mental state had deteriorated so badly that people close to him quietly began fearing the worst. Then came 1988, the year that quite literally decided whether Ringo Starr would live or die. He finally accepted that he couldn't keep living this way, and he and his wife checked into the Betty Ford Center together, searching for one last shot at recovery. The process was brutal, orking him to confront the parts of himself he'd spent years avoiding. He walked out having sworn off alcohol and cigarettes for good, determined to salvage what was left of his family and his career. That same year, he also adopted a vegetarian lifestyle, a decision that, decades later, still seems to be paying off in the energy and vitality he carries today. He had already lost the closest thing he had to a brother. Then he very nearly lost himself entirely to addiction. But at 48 years old, he made the decision that quietly built the foundation for the legend people see now. Coming out of rehab with a completely new outlook, Ringo founded something remarkable in 1989, the All-Star Band, a rotating lineup built around one simple idea: everyone on stage is a star. The concept let him share the spotlight with respected musicians from other legendary acts, each performing their own greatest hits while Ringo held the rhythm together behind them. It gave him a way to stay connected to music without the crushing pressure of chasing chart domination. Over more than 3 decades, the lineup has shifted again and again, but that founding spirit has never changed. In 2008, he launched something deeply personal: the Peace and Love campaign. Starting on his 68th birthday, he began asking fans worldwide to pause every year on July 7th at exactly noon, raise 2 fingers in a peace sign, and say the words together. For Ringo, this isn't just a publicity moment. It's become something closer to a personal philosophy, the thing that keeps him grounded and hopeful. His decades of dedication eventually earned him the industry's highest honors. In 2015, he was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame a second time, this time as a solo artist, cementing that his impact reaches well beyond his Beatles years. Then, in 2018, he received a knighthood from the British royal family, with Prince William presenting him the honor at Buckingham Palace in recognition of his lifetime of work in music and charity, a moment that felt like a full-circle restoration of everything he'd rebuilt. When the pandemic shut the world down in 2020, Ringo refused to slow down. He embraced virtual performances to keep connecting with fans, releasing EPs like Zoom In and Change the World, each one carrying his trademark sense of hope. Even in isolation, he held on to the belief that music could still bring people together. From a sickly child barely expected to survive childhood to a living legend still going strong at 85, Ringo Starr's story is, at its core, a testament to persistence. His long overdue confession doesn't just rewrite our understanding of the Beatles' inner dynamics. It offers a blueprint for resilience, discipline, and choosing optimism again and again, even after everything falls apart.